so far the right fats and proteins are essential. Is there anything else you can tell us now?
There's a lot of things that relate to our diet and our health and our fats and things like that. The quality of protein is extremely important. There's over 22 amino acids. Now, amino acids is something that needs to be covered in thoroughly. I have another chart to try to help tell us about amino acids. Let's go to that chart. On this chart, I call it the food in grams of protein. I know nobody wants to really start counting grams of protein. Here we have so many grams of protein measured for each type of food. Well, in here I show complete. Yes, 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 these are complete. This is a yes and no, meaning most of the nuts are complete, but there's a few of them when they're toasted, they're not complete. And then here you have some items that are not complete. We have things like beans and even whole wheat flour, peanut butter. A lot of these things we like to talk about that's really good. I'm not going to cover all these, as you can see, but you look on these for yourself. What are the complete ones and how many grams of protein in there? Now, a man would usually need about 70 grams of protein, a woman 60 to 100, and that has their different ages on here and situations. Boys 85 to 100, girls 75 to 80, and littler children 40 to 70. These are grams of protein needed every day of life. Now, you normally try to divide these up a little bit, say maybe a third or more of them for breakfast, maybe a half, and then a smaller amount for lunch, and then even a smaller amount for the evening meal. Protein contains about 22 amino acids. 8 are considered essential to life for adults. 10 amino acids are essential for growing children. Our bodies are supposed to make the balance needed out of the essential ones if provided in large enough quantities. If all essential amino acids are not available in adequate amounts at any one meal or at the same time, the amino acids will be wasted. So that's one of the reasons we need to have all of these complete and balanced amino acids in here so that we can make them up. Now, yes, you can combine two different incomplete ones to put them together to make a complete protein. We must talk about cooking when we talk about protein, because cooking foods can change protein. If you've ever done a roast and ended up with some crackling meat, at that point the protein becomes totally indigestible. So the more you cook protein, the less digestible it is. That's why a lot of people choose a medium rare steak, or at least medium. But a well-done steak, you're approaching the area where you are harming a lot of the protein and you won't get the proper value out of it. There is also such things as good and bad proteins. Now, there's quite a bit of things we could talk about, the clean and the unclean. There's some proteins of better quality than others. Some of them digest in a different place in the human body. Life seems to be full of good and bad.
Clean and unclean meats, I didn't think that mattered anymore.
About 3,500 years ago in the Bible, it started talking about some unclean meats and clean meats. And today, those same items that they called unclean are still some of our polluted meats. And we want to talk a lot about that and have a chart I call meats that are not recommended. Let's turn to that chart now. Okay, this chart I call meats that are not recommended for food. This has a list of shellfish. You can read them off. All your standard things from lobster and crab and shrimp and so forth. All shellfish have 60 to 100 times more pollutants or toxins in their shell and body than other fish. They're actually designed to help take the pollutants out of the ocean. They're filter feeders. They collect it in their body. Here's some other meats that are pork and catfish and rabbit and squid and things like that. These are the scavenger group, or they eat dead and sick foods. Note, all of the above digest in the wrong place in the body. Now, I'll tell you a story. Dr. Reams, a PhD, made a study of some 10,000 different foods. And in studying these foods, he found about 18 of them digested in the wrong place for human nutrition. Absolutely the wrong place. And he didn't even know what he was looking at. And he asked his fellow colleagues, what are these? What's this list that I have here of some 18 different things? I think I have about 16 on here, but he had about 18 foods. And a few of them finally said, well, that's the list that's in the Bible that says of the foods that are unclean that you're not supposed to eat. Well, today, these foods are still unclean. They still do us harm. There is records of many of these foods being taken in, and they actually die from the pollutants that's in these foods. Where a regular fish doesn't collect the pollutants like this does 60 to 100 times in their body. And there's many people have an allergy against this, and when you have an allergy against one of these, sometimes you can die from it. it is that potent of a type of an allergy. So I look at this little chart down here. It says man's greed. This is kind of up to the individual. But if there's 10,000 foods to choose from, and it is said that you can eat all of the foods except just a small number of foods that's not clean to eat, well, man comes along with his greed and says, I want them also. Well, he happens to take a little bit of a beating for that because there's so many different problems. It won't digest in the right place. Even the protein level is usually lower than normal in most of these foods here.
Isn't sugar a carbohydrate and one of the main building blocks?
You're absolutely right. It is one of the three main building blocks, but the point is that sugar we now talk of is refined sugar. We have a chart. I'd like to look back at this main bodybuilding tool chart that we have over here. On this chart we see we have main bodybuilding tools. We've seen the chart before and it's broke up into these three parts, but let's really look at this idea. This is quality protein. We've already determined that there is proteins that's not complete, and so it's not quite fully a quality protein. You can even cook them or ruin them in different ways. So we're really looking at a quality protein now. Works the same way with the complete carbohydrates. Sugar, yes, sugar is a carbohydrate, but it's an incomplete. It is a refined carbohydrate. It won't give you the vitamins and minerals that's necessary for human life, so we really can't count that in here. Here you need a complete carbohydrate. About 40% of your diet is that. And that's a very enjoyable one because many things are somewhat sweet. You eat grapes and various kinds of fruits. There's a lot of sweetness to it, and it is a carbohydrate. And there's some carbohydrates that are not particularly sweet. They're starch carbohydrates. Now we have the natural fat we've already talked about too. Again, there has to be quality fats. It can't be hardened fats. Now all of them, we need the same: natural, water, the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. And I think one of the questions was, is there any other things? Yes, these vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. I'd like to tell you a little bit of a story here. Picture a field, maybe a great big field, a city block or two, and you're going to build a big building on it. Well, there you drive your trucks up and you put every one of these key building blocks. Let's call them truckloads of concrete blocks and steel and wood and all the little parts that's going to be put up in that building out there. And you also then have your vitamins and minerals. Okay, let's call those the nails and the mortar and electric wiring and all the things out there. And they're sitting there on this field, these big truckloads of products. So it's a main building tools. You've got the protein, the carbohydrates, and the fat, and you got your vitamins and minerals. And you sit back with your arms crossed. And you say, hey, nothing's happening. The building is not being built. And that's the same way with these building blocks in your human body. It won't build anything unless you add the enzymes or the people, the directors of all of this, that determine how all these things are going to get sawed up and molded together, fit together, or putty together, whatever you want to call it, nailed together, anything else. These enzymes are directing all of that. The enzymes are doing all the work of it. They're the people, the workers out there. So enzymes are an extremely important item. And I wanted to make sure I covered that. So then there is complex sugars. There's also complex starches, like potatoes and brown rice. I would suggest eating potatoes in the shell. There's about 47% of the value of a potato is in the shell. So it's very full of minerals and other things that you need. So now we have brown rice. Brown rice has all the B vitamins on the outside of it. Normally it's been milled off of it. And they sometimes feed those to the animals and give you a white rice. And that white rice is not the kind of rice that we know some of the people living on in the Far East. They live on a whole rice, a brown rice or a wild rice. And it is much better for us than any white rice that ever could be. And it works the same way with the whole wheat products. They are complex carbohydrates. They have the vitamins, they have minerals, they have the things necessary in them. They're a starch. And it's converted in our body to the proper things. Maybe white things are just too pure. And if white things are too pure, then they don't have the things in it we really need.
So protein, fats, and carbohydrates are essential. Is there anything else?
Well, there's quite a few other things in the minerals that we should talk about. About 40 nutrients are necessary for human life. Some people think there may be about 66 that's really out there that we really have, but about 40 are considered necessary. Now, 35 of those are water soluble. Now, of course, let's say we cook a big pot of soup or something, or we cook our vegetables in it, and next thing you know, we're draining the water off of it.
Well, when you drain the water off, guess what? 35 out of the 40 is being drained away in the water. Now, a lot of people will use that water, and they'll make other things with the water. And you'd save it sometimes and make their rice with the water that they've gotten off of various vegetables that they've done. So now the rest of them, the other 5, are oil-soluble. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are some of the oil-soluble ones that you need. And those will dissolve in the fats and the oils. Think about even, well, the broth in the water. The many, many uses that you can use for that is very valuable. I think some people like to start a meal out with a soup. And I don't know where that came from, but it's a pretty good idea. If you're cooking your foods and you end up with a lot of broth, you want to make use of it. You don't want to throw it away. And you go to a restaurant, you usually have a spatula or some kind of a kitchen tool with all these holes in the bottom of it, and you put it on your plate because you don't want water running all over your plate. Well, it's a shame. You're getting 5 of the nutrients, and 35 of them's going back somewhere else. That's a pity. Now, heat kills some of these vitamins and minerals, and so these are all very, very important. Enzymes we talked about. I think we'll be saying more about them. But at between 107 degrees and 122 degrees, all enzymes die. Now, you can just about picture a meal. Sometimes everything is cooked or heated. Today, you get frozen concentrated orange juice. It has been heated, and all the enzymes are dead. So enzymes are one of the key things, too.
Red meat, is that good or bad?
Well, we want to think of red meat. There's a lot of different kinds of red meat. And beef is red meat, and lamb is red meat, and pork is red meat, in spite of whatever advertisements are coming out and they're trying to say it isn't. But it is still a red meat. It's really the fats that's the problem on red meat. And if there's anything that is filled with fats, it's pork products. Most of them are filled with lots of fats, and also the other processing that's done. A lot of the pork products have very much processing done to them, all kinds of additives and nitrates and nitrites and these kinds of things. There's a lot of processed up foods that way. But the actual types of red meat would be in the beef that they a lot of times talk about. They try to limit that. When we've talked about that, let's keep it down to like a range-fed beef where it's not filled with hormones and it's not filled with any of the DES or any other kind of chemicals that they use to fatten these beef artificially. And that's what you want to get away from. If you can buy the meat that is less fat, buy the less fat cuts. Insist on the meat not being filled with the injections of hormones and things that can carry over and affect your life too. Some of them do that. They keep these animals in little pens and things like that. And review back to the chart on the protein grams, and you'll realize that some of the red meat is very high in protein grams, and it's very complete protein. So eat your red meat, but eat it lean, and eat it without the hormones if you can.
Does chicken have hormones?
Well, you know, that's a pretty good story, because chicken is an unusual situation. If I said, okay, you live in Florida, let's say, then buy your chicken from out of state, buy it from Georgia. Now, if you happen to live in Georgia, don't buy it in Georgia, buy it in Florida. Now, that sounds really weird. But here's what happens. The United States government, in this case, has said there are certain kinds of these hormones and other things that they might inject in these chickens that we know is a potential cancer former. This type of a cancer former, okay, this type of a product can form cancer, and so they're not going to allow it to go across the state border. And that's why if you buy chickens, sometimes always buy it out of state. Now, there's some chickens today that says no additives and no hormones have been added and things like that. And for goodness sakes, pick that kind. That's much better.
Is salt good or bad for you?
Even the Bible says that salt is very good for you. So I want to go to a chart over here to see if we can find out some more things about salt. I call this chart to salt or not to salt. And that's going to have to be a question you answer in your own heart. There's really 3 types of salts that are necessary for food to pass from your blood to the cells and the cell waste to go back into your blood for elimination. Now, all 3 must be in balance for good health. I'll repeat, they must be in balance for good health. These 3 salts, represented by this group of bar chart here, is the sodium salts, which is table salt, and that happens to be sodium chloride. And then we have potassium salts, and we get a lot of that from potatoes, bananas, and leafy vegetables, and our calcium salts, and we find that in milk and cheese and leafy vegetables. These need to be in this nice balance for all of this very important process with trillions of your cells for it to operate correctly. There's a lot of bad advice around, and sometimes we take it, and that is, well, potatoes just might be fattening, bananas might be fattening, and milk, well, you're an adult now and you don't need milk, amount to anything, and cheese, that's something that's a little fattening and maybe it's a little binding, so we'll just try to do without some of those. And then it says, I don't like leafy vegetables. Who needs rabbit food? Well, there's a lot of people that call a vegetable or a salad as rabbit food, and they think it's not important because, let's face it, most salads are made up of water, but they also have a tremendous amount of enzymes and vitamins and minerals. The results of this bad advice is that they have an out of balance. The sodium seems too high now. This new bar chart shows the sodium salts still up there, and the potassium salts are down, the calcium salts are down, and it is not balanced any longer. Well, the doctor's advice to correct this, because you're going to run into trouble when your waste doesn't go back into your bloodstream properly and your cells aren't fed, you're going to start having all kinds of problems. So as these problems occur, you'll go to the doctor, and the doctor's advice says, stop eating table salt. You don't need salt. It might increase your blood pressure or whatever they're going to tell you. And so now you drop your salts down to a level to try to get them back in level. But in the meantime, all three of them are low. The results, it'll make you short on all three of these salts. You'll also stop eating many of the good foods because of the poor taste. Let's face it, salt makes a lot of different foods taste good, and we like it. It's one of the main tasting things on our tongue. The nutritional advice, and my advice also, is regain the balance by eating the foods that are missing in your diet. So start eating the potassium salt foods, which is the potatoes and the bananas and leafy vegetables and others, and the calcium salt foods, again, the milk, cheese, leafy vegetables. And as you build up these, now you get this all back in balance again and your body can function correctly.
Fiber and oat fiber. Is that popular today?
I don't know very many people that really likes fiber. You know, fiber, you don't digest it, and so the taste isn't there. They're all the time having to add sugar and other products to it to try to make it taste good. Well, I'd like to give you a little bit of a thought about fiber and oat fiber. I've got anything against eating oats or fiber foods, except the taste, and sometimes they fix that up wrong. There's a lifetime of eating chart that I'd like to show you over here, and that'll give you the best advice I know. On this chart, lifetime of eating habits, we see three general areas here, and I call this a pendulum, or the pendulum effect. If a person lives a kind of a life I call the unhealthy left over here, and they're eating like people used to eat a lot, and people still do, some of them, fat meat, very few salads, very few raw fruits, peeled potatoes, coffee and tea, tobacco sodas, white flour, white sugar, gravy, desserts, candy, chocolate, white rice, white pasta, homogenized milk, margarine, bacon, lard, sausage, processed meats, alcohol, canned food, chemicals, and foods. In other words, they're eating like this, and most of their diet's made up of probably anywhere 50, 60, 70, 80% white sugar and white flour, and they have taken out most of the fiber. They've literally tried to eat foods that doesn't have very much fiber in it. Well, they have troubles, various troubles, and somebody starts advising them and says, now that you've done this wrong, we're going to have the resultant right that you're going to have to do. Don't put any oil on your dressings, and of course you're going to have to eat potato skins now. They're getting popular in some places. Don't eat red meat. You've got to eat a lot of fiber foods, and maybe you want Gatorade too. A lot of health problems will come along. You have diet sodas and oat cereals and NutraSweet and no gravy and no desserts, artificial candy, unhappy life, all kinds of diets, a lot of tasteless foods, no fat milk. Got to have special things like that. There's bypass heart surgery may come along, and you got these no-fat diets too. Vegetarians, no alcohol, mono diets, mental problems. In other words, you're getting all these resultants because you did that. The best advice I know is to say, why didn't you do this in the first place? Or go to this level. And there's quite a bit of things here. I don't believe I'll take time to read them to you, but things that are natural. The intelligent center. This is the way to live. This is the way to eat. This is a way to help keep from going to these kinds of things. And it's a way that, had you been doing it, you wouldn't have been doing this. And I call that the intelligent center. Make sure you read that on your charts at home.
Is whole wheat really better than white enriched bread and flour?
Well, I sure think that it is. There's a lot of nutrients in whole wheat, and there's about 24 of them in a grain of wheat. And you take out about 2 of them and save it, and then the others you feed to the animals. And so you have a very, very limited type of food in it. So there's very little good good nourishment left in white bread. And then, of course, they enrich that with several chemicals, synthetic vitamins, and they call it enriched. I mentioned before, a lot of places it's illegal to have enriched bread like that. Now, I want to mention one more time about the rats that were tests were run, and some of those died. Difference between it, they died because they used white bread instead of whole wheat. I'd like to really point this out a little more by going to some supermarket products on the next chart. I call this all supermarket products containing bread, flour, grain, and cereal. It's mainly a story about bread, or it's a story about flour. Now, there's 16 harmful chemical steps for bread. I don't want to read every one of them, but it starts out from the soil. It's depleted in organic matter first, then the chemicals are added, and it keeps on down. The seed is depleted, and it's full of rust and smut, low protein content, and it keeps stepping down through each different step. Some of them so dangerous that you have to add a gas mask to keep it on. They totally saturate the different chemicals, and whether the flour is bleached with 4 or 5 toxic chemicals, or whether it's nitrogen trichloride, ages the flour, various steps that's going in here. They even condition the dough with chemical emulsifiers. They add chemical extenders. 16 poisoning processes goes to every kind of a cereal or a white flour or even whole wheat flour in the grocery store. I cannot see of any product in the grocery store that's made with flour that is really fit to eat. They are all too poisoned up. They know that it's a kind of product that if they don't poison it, various insect damage will get in here. Various kinds of things will get into the flour and make it so it's unedible. So they poison it up. So unless the store carries an organic bread, there isn't any to buy in any supermarket that's any good to eat. And I highly recommend that all your bread and flours and grain products is purchased at a health food store, where at that point they go to some place like Deaf Smith County, Texas, the richest soil in the country, organically raised wheat, and they get their grain from there and they grind it fresh, and it has none of these in it. And bread is something that you eat every day. Bread is something that's bread and your cereals and so forth. So that means all your boxed cereals is not good. You can go to the health food store and get your cereals too. Stay away from that stuff. You're feeding your kids, yourself, that kind of chemicals every day, and something that you use every day. That is a way to ill health in a hurry. There's just one other thing I'd like to say about the white flour product. There has been some records kept of some people that were lost on a raft in the middle of the ocean. And various situations existed. They had some kind of crackers, white bread, some kind of white flour products. Some of them ate the white flour products on the raft. They estimated that the extreme conditions, that within about 4 days, they died. And the others that didn't eat the white stuff, they were able to live because it actually takes that much from your body. It is that harmful to you. So there's very few things like that can usually come about, but there has been some records of things like that that's happening. And so it just takes too much from your body. It's just not good for you.
Well, what about Gatorade? Most athletes use it. Is that good?
Well, I wouldn't want to say whether Gatorade is good or bad or not, but let's just talk about these general type of drinks with minerals in them. This has a little bit to do with the human body. And when the human body gets inactive at all, it starts sweating. And when you sweat, you have various minerals that comes out through the pores. And this sweat was analyzed to try to see, well, let's see what kind of minerals comes out. And the idea was, let's put these minerals back in your body. And by putting the minerals back in your body seems like a pretty good idea. But there's one problem here. Also, your sweat glands are called vicarious elimination. They're almost like any other elimination that your body has, and you want to sweat out various body poisons and body toxins and other kinds of products that's in your body that shouldn't be in your body, like any other elimination. So we have then the idea that let's make up a product out of different minerals and chemicals or whatever else is there and put it in and give you a drink. So you're drinking something like, almost like human sweat. And that's the whole idea of it. And of course it comes out of your body very fast, gives a cooling effect, and a lot of the sports people thinks that's good. I think there's probably too much toxic things, too many things that should be waste and should be ridded out of your body is in a product, any of the mineral products like this, and that we're getting rid of waste through our skin. So maybe we're fooling ourselves to whether we should use any of the type of minerals that way.
Jack, what about iced tea or hot tea?
Okay, well, both iced tea and hot tea, the normal kind you buy in a grocery store, usually has caffeine in it and thiene in the teas, both hot and iced tea. And they're alkaloids that accumulate in your body, and we've talked about tea quite a bit. The other one, of course, was theobromine. It's in the chocolate.
Is herb tea the same?
Herb tea, thank goodness, there's all kinds of herb teas. There must be at least 100 different varieties of herb teas. And probably some of them taste pretty bad, but there's some of them that taste very good. They have all kinds of flavors, and they have all kinds of nutritional value. There's people that knows a lot about herbs, and they might recommend one tea for one thing and another tea for something else. But in general, there is quite a list of teas, and thank goodness you can find them in grocery stores as well as health food stores to find some of the natural teas. And most of them has no caffeine, although there's a few that will have caffeine. But most of them that have no caffeine will be so indicated on the box that it has no caffeine. So you can get many, many good flavors of teas.
Well, Mr. Diel, what can we drink?
Well, I recommend all the things that are natural to drink, and we can start listing a lot of those. There's things like all the natural juices, and I prefer natural meaning unsweetened juices. Freshly squeezed is the best choice. Even vegetable juices are pretty good to drink. People make carrot juice, they put a little bit of celery in it or a few other things, and they make some pretty good juiced drinks. So a juicer is a very valuable tool. Probably even 100% pure unsweetened juices, even if they are canned or frozen, is another pretty fair choice. I recommend spring water or good bottled water that's considered a natural bottled water, not just a treated tap water type, but I mean a good natural one. Not distilled. I do not recommend distilled water. It doesn't have the minerals in it that we need, and the distilling process will carry over many of the chemicals that are volatile, and the chemicals will carry over into distillate, and you end up with some of those chemicals in the distilled water. So I don't recommend it as a good product. And then there's a rule. We say, well, what about tap water, and do we want to put one of these new modern filtering devices on our tap water? Well, I can't tell you that it wouldn't be an improvement to some of the taps. We have a lot of stuff in the water that's not good, and chlorine is one of the main ones. They have tied chlorine to heart trouble, quite a bit of it as being harmful to you. But here's a rule to follow. If your particular filtering device, no matter who makes it, no matter what it costs, if it will not remove fluoride in the water, and it's not that fluoride's bad, and we've already talked about it, and I consider it very bad, but the trick is if it will not remove fluoride, it will not remove about 109 other chemicals. And those other chemicals are even more harmful probably than the fluoride. So I'm saying don't buy one of the filtering units that won't remove fluoride. There is a lot of natural soft drinks that you might be able to get at a health food store, and I'd say you could probably go and pick out some of those. I would even say drink beer. Now that seems to be odd, but I'd say drink beer before I would drink any kind of cola drinks or the real heavy sweetened drinks, because beer is probably 1,000 times better for you than a cola drink with caffeine. Wine, a natural wine, and you can tell a wine that's good for you because the bottom of the bottle, the base of the bottle will have an area that is sort of sunken very deep into it. And instead of a cap that screws on, it'll usually be a cork in the top. And so that is more of a type of naturally fermented instead of some of the chemically fermented wines. Then you could get, if you can get raw white milk. Get it unhomogenized if possible. The next best choice would be a pasteurized milk, but a raw milk would be far better. I'm sure we'll talk about milk more, but in generally speaking, pasteurized milk is a result of unclean barns and unclean cattle and unclean conditions. They say, well, because it's not clean, you might get a disease from it, and lots of bacteria in it that would be bad for you, so that kind of milk is not very good. And you'd want then a certified raw milk. It means it comes from very clean processing, very clean barns, and very clean cows. There is some coffee substitutes, and they're made out of grain products. There's a few of them that taste quite a bit like coffee. Now, I don't drink coffee of any kind, but I've had some friends that has been given some of these coffee substitutes, and that's not so bad. Even the old postum idea, some people can like that, and you can use spring water and you make postum and make some cold postum drinks that taste pretty good to take the place of iced tea. So that's about the story on the drinks, but try to always find some natural drinks, and natural water is probably the best choice.
What about 8 good glasses of water per day?
It sounds like that's a good idea, and there might be some conditions that perhaps a doctor or some nutritionist would tell you that you might need a little more than normal. Usually, if we're eating normal foods, good quality foods, our own taster will tell us that that's all, that we need water or we don't need water, and we can count on that pretty good. If we drink more water than we think we need, try to push the idea of 8 glasses a day. Remember, it wash out the water-soluble vitamins, and the B vitamins are very important. So the extra water can actually do us harm from that point of view. So drink water when it's thirsty.
Well, milk must be okay, right?
Well, we've said quite a bit about the milk, and I think that same story will hold true. I prefer it to be raw certified milk. If you can't get that, and right now it's almost impossible most places in the country, I'd like to mention that milk is kind of a problem area. Homogenized milk is known to cause some kinds of problems in the body for a lot of people. The fats has been forced under very high pressure to be homogenized within the milk and within the proteins, and it changes the milk enough till it's not good. There is a story about a calf. They run some tests. A calf, whenever the cow is delivering milk to the calf can survive and flourish, and it's really good. But whenever the calf, the same milk is taken and now it's pasteurized and homogenized, and the exact same mother's milk is given back to the calf will die. Now, you are only allowed to drink the milk that killed the calf. You are not allowed today, most of the time, to have the certified raw milk. And that's kind of a pity. That's the way it is. Certified milk comes from a very clean, inspected dairy. We should all work to help force the dairy industry, to help force the government, help force whoever's necessary into having and allowing certified raw milk again. And if nothing else, definitely running at least a step in between to have just pasteurized milk. That's where the cream raises to the top. And to have pasteurized milk, and to totally eliminate homogenized milk from all of our diet.
You spoke about enzymes. Are enzymes really important?
Enzymes are very exciting to talk about because I've understood that there's a different enzyme to digest everything on the face of this earth. If they wanted to digest iron right out of the iron ore, there is types of enzymes. So they're spectacular. They do all kinds of things. They help to make the lightning bug light, the electric eel give you the electric shock, the leaves to turn in the fall, and also to fall before the wind might blow. So enzymes are really spectacular. We talked about the swallowing a bean, how a different enzyme has to break down every part of that bean or every part of your food. And even another different enzymes combine all of those up into the different parts of our body. I've already told about the building, on the building lot. We've got to have enzymes to do the jobs, to do the work. If you could measure the amount of enzymes in a human body at any given moment, you would probably be able to predict how many sicknesses and diseases, that type of thing is wrong, and how long you would live. That's just how important enzymes are. With over 500 of them being in your liver alone to help to do the various functions of your body, I suspect it will be years yet before we find out all the things that enzymes will do in your body. Probably that's why the calf died after they heated its own mother's milk, is the enzymes were killed, and that is in the homogenizing process. So with enzymes around to digest everything and do all the functions, we don't want to do something to kill them. Remember, the fluoride even is an enzymatic poison. So that's probably the main story about enzymes. Just remember, when you heat a food past 107 degrees up to 122, all enzymes are killed. If we don't watch it, our meals are filled with cooked foods with no enzymes. We need to keep our enzyme supply high. We need to keep maybe half of the food that we eat raw. And that can be vegetables and fruits and nuts. And of course, we could have raw certified milk. There's many things that we can have raw. A lot of our vegetables we eat raw that we now cook. So it's much better to have them raw. A garden pea, you pick it out of the garden, pull it out of the shell, and eat it fresh. It's very sweet. It's very good for you. You can put it into salads, and it's really nice. It has about 100 times the nutritional element of that pea after it goes through our canning processes and being cooked, and maybe even perhaps you reheat it at the table and you pour off the juices. I mean, it's just terrible to have to heat up things. You have to eat so much more foods that are cooked and killing the enzymes to try to get the same nourishment.
Is there anything really wrong with chocolate?
Okay, the main thing probably is how they process chocolate and the drug that's in chocolate. They process it so that it's always with saturated fats or hardened fats. They process it so that they have lots of sugar in it, and usually it's white sugar too. And when you combine those two along with the drugs, we now have cholesterol problems, we now have skin problems, we now have all kinds of clogging of blood vessels, and considering causing trouble in every vital organ there is, just because of things like that. Now, chocolate is not the only culprit, but chocolate is a main one because it is habit forming. That means it jumps into the group that says, I want more chocolate, I want more chocolate, keep giving me more chocolate. I want chocolate cake, I want chocolate ice cream, you know, chocolate pies, chocolate desserts, everything chocolate. And that's how we find that we're hooked on it.
Well, what should be included in a good breakfast?
As you know, I think a breakfast is probably the most important meal of the day. And I want to explain a lot about that as time goes along. But breakfast should be the largest meal. It should have a very high amount of protein. It should have plenty of raw fruit. It should have some whole grain product like a whole grain cereal or a whole grain bread. And it should have perhaps milk. It should have like toast and butter, that kind of a thing. And it should be a very complete breakfast, one of the main things. And if we go back to that protein counting where we can count our protein, I think there should be probably 30 to 40 grams of protein for breakfast. You literally count it up. Might be a glass of whole milk or buttermilk if the person likes buttermilk. So we would count our grams of protein and make sure we get between 30 and 40 grams of protein for breakfast. Let's turn to a chart in here. So get your chart out that's breakfast protein. Let's just take a look at the situations of three types of breakfasts. This is a breakfast protein relationship. This one is a high protein with medium carbohydrate. I consider it the best. Then we have a poor one as a high carbohydrate and low protein, and then a medium protein, medium carbohydrate as just a good breakfast. Let's see the difference. Up here on this best breakfast, we're looking at a breakfast meal, and here's our blood sugar level moving along and gradually coming down later in the day, clear to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. This is unusual. This is for if you wanted a breakfast strong enough to take care of you for, say, a 2-meal day type of thing, where you can have a breakfast and then a mid-afternoon meal or a 4 o'clock meal, and that's it. You wouldn't need 3 meals. It will sustain you much longer and over a longer period of time. Here we're talking about 1/4 pound of hamburger or some kind of equivalent real meat, 2 eggs, in other words, both of them in this case, some whole wheat toast, or you could have a whole wheat cereal in here with butter here, and some milk, and maybe an apple or any kind of whole fruit. So this is an extra amount of protein, and this is going to sustain you for a long time. In comparison to that, we'll look at a high carbohydrate breakfast, and many people eat this kind of a breakfast or far worse. There's many people start their day with a cigarette and later on have a donut and a cup of coffee or something. But in this case, we have orange juice, coffee, cream, sugar, maybe 2 strips of bacon, toast, jam, even oatmeal and milk. So it sounds like, boy, that's a powerful breakfast. But it's really not. What is happening here is it's causing your blood sugar level to go up high very quickly, and because it doesn't have much protein in it, it drops it off very quickly down below and in the danger area, and it stays down below for a long period of time. So it's a low protein breakfast. It's very poor. It gets you in the danger area. You're susceptible to lots of diseases and things like that. Down here in a medium, or maybe a breakfast like most of us would have, or I recommend that we have on a regular basis, is a half a grapefruit or some kind of a fruit. Start it off with that. Then a couple of eggs, or you could have the 1/4 pound hamburger. Then some kind of whole grain cereal, or some kind of toast or something like that, a type of whole milk, and maybe honey if you have a cereal. And here you have some raisin toast, could be for in place of ordinary toast, and butter on your toast if you have toast. This gives you a balanced breakfast. You've got your enzymes with lots of vitamins and minerals in it with your whole raw fruit. And your eggs give you, about 12 grams of protein for 2 eggs. and your milk will give you about another 8, 10, 12 grams of protein. Your whole grain cereal might give you another few grams of protein, and it will make yourself up. Your blood sugar level will come from your resting period. That's why it's called break fast. It breaks the fast of your nighttime period, and it goes up and then slowly returns down again in time at noon. You'll be hungry for a noon lunch. So this is a recommended breakfast unless you'd like to go to a 2-meal day, and you do that by eating a much even larger breakfast.
What about bean sprouts? Are they good for you?
Bean sprouts, of course, have been used in China and lots of places for a long time, and a lot of the new health food interest people have said, yeah, bean sprouts are very good. And in fact, lots of kinds of sprouts. You have alfalfa sprouts and many, many kinds of seeds that they're sprouting today. There's an unusual thing that takes place when you sprout seeds. If you take, say, an alfalfa sprout and measure the protein content in the seeds, and then you sprout the seeds, just putting them in a dark area and with clean water and sprouting them will increase the protein content 8 times. So there's a tremendous increase in that. Obviously, there's still enzymes. These seeds are things that could grow, actually grow a living plant. And many seeds will grow quite a large plant. So we're talking about a lot of nutritional value in seeds. We talked about sunflower seeds as a type of seed. I don't know that they normally sprout a sunflower seed for you to eat, but the sunflower seed is very, very nearly perfect. It has all the nutritional value you need: proteins, fats, carbohydrates, the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. Well, many seeds have this full spectrum of nutritional elements that's very badly needed. So in sprouting them, or if you're going to have a fallout shelter and you have sunflower seeds, you can have lots of seeds. It doesn't take up very much room, but boy, it increases. You do need water, and it will increase tremendously the amount of value. So I highly recommend sprouts. One of the things about sprouts is, how do you eat them? A lot of people think they, taste a little bit unusual. They're used to lettuce, like a head lettuce. It's very bland. Well, here's sunflower seeds, or any of these seeds well, we're not sprouting a sunflower seed, but when you sprout a seed, it has some green material there, and you can buy them in the grocery stores now. You can buy them in the health food stores. Sometimes you can buy them that says organically raised. They're a terrific thing to take the place of a lot of salad things. And sandwiches. You can make large sandwiches of these. Use whole grain bread, put some good type of mayonnaise or salad dressing of some type on it. Sometimes there's some herb seasonings that you can put on it, and make a thick, very nutritious sandwich. And it won't exactly take care of all the protein that you need, but it'll give you the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. And by the way, you can save a lot of money by incorporating these sprouts in your diet. And where they give you a tremendous amount of nutritional value, say comparison to a head of lettuce. Now, a head of lettuce is an artificial item. You do not grow hard, iceberg hard type heads of lettuce naturally. It requires a lot of chemicals. So you have no natural heads of lettuce in the hard type of heads. You do have them that's leafy, the leafy type, maybe the Boston type, or a very, very heavy leafy lettuce type thing. You do have some very good ones. Romaine lettuces are good too, and I highly suggest them. Buying the head lettuce I do not suggest. A little bit, that's like a sprout. It's almost like a piece of a sprout. But sprouts, definitely include them in your diet.
Well, Mr. Diel, is yogurt good?
Oh, yogurt is terrific. Whenever you use yogurt, it gets into your intestines and aids the utilization of all your B vitamins. So now we've talked about B vitamins a lot in here, and the energy it gives you and the protection from all kinds of diseases. And now here's yogurt, something that if you eat on a regular basis, it builds up the proper flora in your intestines and it aids in the utilization and building up your B vitamin complexes. Now, we have different kinds of yogurt. You have a yogurt that has no sugar in it. Now, a non-sweet yogurt is a little bit close to buttermilk. And I'd say if you like buttermilk, you'll like yogurt. If you don't like buttermilk, you might not like yogurt unless they do sweeten it up a lot. So now we have 2 kinds of yogurt. And one kind they sweeten with regular sugar, put all kinds of fruit in it, and there's some pretty good brands out there, but it's got a lot of sugar in it. Another kind you can get, if you're very careful, has honey for the sweetening. And I would recommend that if you need a sweetened type of yogurt. And you usually won't find that in a grocery store. You'll probably have to go to a health food store and find a brand there that's sweetened with honey. And then they have just plain yogurts that is sweetened, but maybe it's a vanilla flavor or something like that. But other than that, they can put real fruit in the yogurt, sweeten it with honey, And with the quality of the yogurt, it becomes a very good item for your diet. A lot of people are using them to lose weight. Well, obviously, as soon as they pick a yogurt that's got a lot of sugar in it, that doesn't help the weight loss situation hardly at all.
Lots of chemicals are used in our foods. What about those?
It's a sad story, and I'm very biased on it. I feel we don't need chemicals. But in any case, here there's up to, well, 1,000 perhaps chemicals, and according to how the combinations work, there could be easily 10,000 different chemicals in your foods. And I've mentioned that in measuring the chemicals in any given meal, like an average noon meal or dinner, can be, well, they've been measured 197 different chemicals used in those meals. And you can hardly buy anything. I think the real problem is not like years and years ago there might be 1 or 2 or 3 chemicals or chemical substitutes for food in our food, and we could maybe live with that and handle it. Our body is very powerful. When it's nourished pretty good, it can fight off different things, and especially chemicals. We have ways that we look at a chemical like an antibody. It's an item, a thing that shouldn't be in your body, and with plenty of vitamin C in your diet, it'll combine with that chemical, cancel it out, and get it out of your body. But there comes a time when you have these thousands and thousands of foods, and each food having anywhere from 1 or 2 up to 8 or 10 or 15 different chemicals in it, that we reach a point our body can no longer handle them. So it's just too much. And of course, what's the argument on the other side? Well, the chemical company says, look, you can eat this chemical, and we've fed this chemical to test animals, and many, many test animals have had this, and they didn't die right away. Well, they're very poor tests, and they're definitely unfair tests. Try adding thousands and thousands of chemicals and all kinds of combinations that the chemists have never even tried to work out yet. Try to put those into these foods and feed them to the animals and see what happens. Well, we know of tests that's been run in some of those too, and all kinds of things happen. All types of diseases are formed, and real problems are there. You just can't overcome it. It reaches a point that it is a quick tie into why 97% of the population has some kind of illness or sickness or disease or chronic thing that they're being in a hospital twice a year, and there's good reason for it. I'm wondering how we can really live at all if we didn't have such a super great design on our body to be able to handle those things. So definitely, besides chemicals being bad and so many of them overcoming our own body capabilities, I see chemicals as like a fraud. It's like saying, well, I can't give you fresh food, I can't give you really good tasting food and properly nourishing food, so I'm going to make it up with chemicals and fool your body. I want to dump in there everything to make it look different, taste different, feel different, smell different, different colors, consistencies, everything you can name. They do anything to a food that's possible. They do it with chemicals, and it just fools all of us. It's a big fraud on the industry.
I don't understand how they can treat people like that.
Well, I would say it's for money. Now, maybe you would agree with me or maybe not, but I think money is a great motivating factor in this land, and I can't blame them. People are in business. You want to be in business to make money, but I think you ought to get it fair and honestly and without hurting people. And so I just feel that they're doing it for the sake of money. Now, here's the thing that I really am strong at. I would like to see everybody else, if they feel the way I do something about it. But I think there ought to be some kind of very, very huge national law that is very simple. It gives the responsibility to anybody. I don't care what they do. If they promote a chemical, they have the responsibility of whatever that chemical might do of harm to anyone. And I don't care who they are. Government agents, processors, stores, business people, food people, anybody in any area of every area, federal government, state government, local government, all of our agencies, our training people, whoever might have a tiny bit of control on what people eat and what kind of health is turned out. There should be some laws saying you are responsible for your actions. Absolutely, totally responsible. You can be taken to court, and to whatever extent. If it kills people, and I've already mentioned that I think that there's areas of caffeine and lots of things like that kills maybe 300,000 people a year. There's other chemicals causing cancer to babies. We ought to look around and find out who causes it, and they should be brought to court, and they should be treated just like a criminal. And that's how strong I'm in this. I know that there's people that are dying for this. I know there's suffering and pain and loss of money and misery in families, and it continues to be perpetuated or allowed to be perpetuated by other people that just knows the truth and won't do anything about it. Somehow or another, the people have to raise up and just say, we're going to change things, and we're going to insist on this being changed. And we're like the Nutritional Foundation. If there's 22 people in that board of directors, and they're the people from the caffeine products and the white flour products and the tobacco products and sugar products and just anything that can be bad for you, and they're the ones controlling our health today. Can't you imagine how much better it'd be if just pick 22 people from off the street, strangers of any age, they would all do a better job for us than that group that's there now. They've got to be out. A lot of things in government, we vote them out because there's some conflict of interest. Boy, if there isn't a conflict of interest in this, then we have no conflicts of interest anywhere. Because they're all saying, don't dare say anything bad about caffeine, because that's my product, you know. We'll make sure that doesn't come out. Don't dare say anything bad about sugar. There's whole books written about that. Sugar Blues at the public library. People, get that Sugar Blues book and read that, and you'll find out how they're running things. And it's not being run like you want. It's not being run for the health of your children. It's not being run for health of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the health of this country. It's really sad. There's too many sick and dying now. There's too many babies being born with cancer. You know, even in the Bible, it says that God says, if anybody hurts some of my little ones, and he may mean children, he may mean all of us as God's children. Says, if anybody hurts any of my little ones, it'd be better that a millstone be hung about his neck and him cast in the depth of the sea. He knows the value. We should be able to see that in the value. That's some of the things we've got to change in this land. That's why we want to kick butts. That's why we want to change these things and vote people out and do the things that's necessary to get health back in this country. We cannot have people like the AMA and that entire group and doctors running the government and all these people and saying, you're going to do it this way and you're going to do it that way. Maybe some of them in control knows that if we keep people sick, they will keep plenty of people coming to the doctors and to the hospitals. Keep them a little sick. A man by the name of Dr. Fritchley in Olney, Illinois, he has since passed away because he was about 72 years old when he told me and my father some of this information. He said, in general, there is about 5 treatments that we can give to people to help some problem. Just on the average, some disease, some malady, about 5 treatments. He says the first one might do a real quick cure or help them really quick. The second one might do it in a little bit longer. And the third one take longer. And the fourth one just kind of keep it going along. And the fifth one maybe never cure it, but just keep them hanging on. And he said, we're never allowed by the AMA to use the first one or we'll get kicked out. We usually don't allow to use the second one. We have to use the third, fourth, or fifth one to treat all kinds of diseases. They don't want us to really cure people fast. We've got to stop stuff like that. Word has to get out. I'm tired of all the medical books and all of the health books that comes out saying, well, go see your doctor. Go see your doctor. Sure, there's times to see your doctor. And there's other times to see a nutritional thing. Better yet is prevention. For goodness sakes, live a life that our foods and nutrition that we get is so good that we either seldom get sick or they're very, very simple types of diseases.
Can we really do without chemicals?
Absolutely. For many, many years, in fact, all of our life, before we started adding a lot of the chemicals, we were living without them. And we were in pretty good shape, too. And I didn't even know about diseases. Many diseases they didn't know about, and germs and bacteria they didn't know much about. My goodness, they'd leave windows open, they didn't have screens, the flies would land on their food, didn't have very good refrigeration, and not good ice or any refrigeration that way. Sometimes they'd leave the food set out. I can remember way back in my childhood, they'd sometimes just cover up the table. From one meal to the next, they would cover the leftover food up on the table. And they didn't want the flies on it, they just didn't want them on there. But flies getting on them, we didn't know how much bacteria they might carry in or anything. But it's things like that. So they grow things in a way today that is quick. When they put chemicals in the soil, the chemicals is designed that they use to grow the plant big and green, a lot of the nitrogen to do that, to make it produce food and maybe be a nice color. But as far as the nutritional value, the chemicals won't do that. It has to have all of the minor ingredients and things like that. So they didn't have the chemicals in there years ago. Now we've added a lot of the chemicals. And most things, if they just grow it better, we wouldn't need the chemicals. Remember how I said, gee, chemicals are used a lot of times to fool you, to substitute for all the good foods that's in there. or to substitute for a good quality. Let's add sugars and let's add other things.
Well, how can you tell chemical food from organic?
That's something that you can tell, and part of that almost comes from your heart. You know, how many have eaten a tomato, for instance? And perhaps you've lived in different parts of the country, and you remember when a tomato was so good and juicy and good tasting that you could just sit there and eat 2 or 3 of them in a row. And then maybe lately, or maybe the type you get in a grocery store, we know maybe they've been picked green, we know they've been shipped somewhere, but they also even take and pick a variety of tomatoes. They run tests to see if they can drop a tomato from 9 feet and hit the solid concrete without breaking the skin. They're interested in things like that. They're trying to grow a square tomato so it will box better. They're trying to do things like that. That's their interest, is how to box them, how to ship them, you know, how to get them to last forever. A little of the irradiation stuff that they do is to try to make these kinds of things just last. They don't care if it never rots, never goes bad. You just set some food there on the counter, and a year later look at it and it still looks just like the food. They think that's good. But if it won't rot in its normal way, then it's not going to digest in its normal way in your system either. And that's a very key thing like that. So there's a chart that I'd like to turn to, call it the Organic Natural Food page, and let's take a look at that chart now. Okay, one of the key ways that we can tell organic food from natural food, besides just looking and sensing that this thing tastes better or it doesn't taste better or it looks a certain way, I'm going to go down this side of the chart. This side of the chart says chemical food may or may not. Now let's face it, we're looking at soils that are depleted sometimes. Sometimes they're not depleted as much as others. Sometimes they don't use as many chemicals as others. So they're going to vary quite a bit. In general, the taste will be poor for a chemical food compared to what you've had before. If you've ever had food that tasted better before, you can almost say it's chemically raised, or the soil is so depleted that maybe they didn't even use chemicals, but it just turned out a poor product. Now, here's an example. Peaches. They usually come out now dry, mealy, instead of the juicy. They're not juicy. They're usually not very sweet. They have a very poor flavor. The seed areas are either rotten looking or they are broken, and sometimes they'll come apart. That is a sign 100% that is not grown organically, it is not grown naturally, and it doesn't have the type of things that it should have, and in addition it's a chemically raised item. You know it because anytime those seeds break apart, you should take them back to the store and say, I want my money back, until the store only buys quality foods. So they come apart. You know a seed could not reproduce itself when it's all broken up and rotted. And also it rots before it's ripe a lot of times. Absolutely goes bad before it even gets ripe enough to eat. Now tomatoes, again, they have poor flavor. Sometimes the seed areas are dark, the skin is very tough, they'll spoil easily, and again, before they're fully ripe. You notice these things on tomatoes. Apples, the seed areas will be bad again in the seed areas. It'll rot at the stem. There'll be a round rot spot right at the stem area. There'll be brown spots underneath the skin, especially in a lot of the red apples that you get. They'll be brown underneath the skin. It'll look like little bruises. They didn't little bruises. It's bad, and the poor taste in the juice is not as juicy as it should be. Lettuce. Now, different kinds of lettuce, but most lettuce will have some brown spots in the leaves. These can be tiny, not much bigger than pepper size, or they can be very large, rotted areas. And the leaf ends, some of them, will have a lot of rot. Now, it won't be just on the outside where they're damaged, but you'll be able to turn down inside of many of these groups of lettuce leaves and find these rotted areas. Potatoes. They'll have rot spots deep into the skin area. Sometimes they'll go down a ½ inch deep or so down into the potato. And a lot of times the potato, again, will rot really quickly before they should. A good potato might dry up a little bit and start to sprout, but a bad one may be rotting for you. Tangerines. I remember the day when tangerines were really juicy and really tasty. Well, instead they come out dry and mealy. And if you've ever had a tangerine that was picked maybe months after it should have been, that is a little similar to the way a chemically raised one might be even almost from day one. And they won't be sweet. Kind of the same deal for oranges. Melons, they're a little harder to tell, but they generally just will not be sweet. They'll have a pretty color, and you'll eat it and you'll say, where'd the flavor go? You don't know where the flavor went. They won't be as tasty. They'll be, juices will be canned and they won't naturally be sweet, and the way you know it, usually, is they will have added sugar. And you'll say, well, why did they put added sugar? Well, they didn't get a quality of juice or fruit. and so they can't make a good tasting juice unless they add sugar. So if they have to add sugar, it means they probably did not have a good quality juice, so don't buy it, because it's not good. They've just made it up. They've fooled you. Meats. This is a tough one, and unless you've had some experience with organically raised beef and beef that's raised on the farm and has really quality, you won't notice it. But it'll have less flavor. It'll definitely need salting, where if you get an organically raised one, it'll be so full of flavor you won't even think it needs salt. So they have a lot of forced fattening too that they do to it. It's way over fat. They're trying to make up the taste of the meat with lots and lots of fat. Milk. Most of it is unclean conditions, and it'll require pasteurization to clean it. They don't care how dirty the barns are. They don't care whether it's got dirt in it or how healthy the cows are. And really, I really don't want to tell you how bad some of the milk is that they mix together and then pasteurize and homogenize. You probably wouldn't want to eat it. On this page, still continuing in here, we have again white flour. Well, because of the grown in the chemical soils, it's very low in protein. It drops down 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% lower than it should be. And of course, white flour only has about 2 nutrients instead of about 24 that's normally in flour. There's over 15 poisons added to a lot of this stuff. Well, this is a little bit related to natural and organic. This is an unnatural item. Margarine. Again, they artificially take what could be a nice corn oil and turn it into an artificial fat. It's definitely something that is not edible. It forms a bad cholesterol in your body. There is no food for your brain or nerves. It is a product never to use. White sugar. There's again no nutrients. It is called there's empty calories. There is no vitamins, no minerals, nothing to it. It's a chemical. It takes from the body. It's usually bleached by more chemicals. It's a soft drug. It's definitely addictive. It will definitely be a habit-forming thing to you and make you want to have it in a lot of things. And all of our food processors knows this. And that's why they'll put it in everything. They'll make a poor soup, they'll add sugar. They'll make a poor anything, they'll add sugar to it. Now the next one is artificial whipped toppings. I don't want to tell you a name brand. I'm not sure, but what they all will do this. I put a little bit of an artificial whipped topping, about a teaspoonful, in a quart container, and I set it out where some roaches could get to it from a grove that was next to my home. Next morning, there was 22 dead cockroaches in it. And I questioned this. It's an excellent roach killer, these artificial whipped toppings. And I asked an exterminator, says, how come? And they said, well, the same material that's in this artificial whipped toppings they use to eradicate roaches from your home. It's very surprising to me. And they call that nice toppings that you put on your desserts and things like that. Excellent roach killer. Okay, chocolate. We've already talked quite a bit about chocolate. It's a hardened fat with sugar. That combination is very dangerous. Besides, it's a drug. It's addictive with theobromine in it. It leads to harder drugs. All right? Coffee, tea, caffeine products, the whole line of them. Again, they're a drug. They're addictive. They damage internal organs. They're not a natural thing. Even though coffee grows on a tree, so does poison, and so does dirt go out in the soil. We don't say, well, you got to eat everything that grows on a tree. I guarantee you there's probably thousands of items that grows on trees that none of us eat. So why do we have to eat coffee? Because it's a drug. It's addictive. It doesn't taste good, but if you think it, your body will say, hey, gee, I've tasted some coffee, and I like that drug feeling, so I'm going to tell the brain up there that it tastes good, in spite of it not tasting good. Okay, I think it kills not just coffee, but all the caffeine and thiamine and theobromine, kills over 300,000 people each year in the United States. That's like declaring war on us. And I'm a little bit upset about that. And it leads to harder drugs. When I have seen people put a baby nipple onto a bottle of caffeine beverage and feed it to a baby, it just makes me cry. I mean, it just tears me up. Now, don't bother people who don't know what they're talking about, but me, it just really does a job for me, and I can't stand to have things like that happen. And that, I know, is why we have so many drug addicts today. They're so hooked on these things, all the chemicals and all of the addictive things. Now, we have pork products here, all kinds of them. Well, 50% contains trichonina worms. Now, when I say 50%, I'm saying government-inspected pork. They do not inspect it for trichinosis. They don't care whether it has trichinosis or not, or if they did care, they are not inspecting it for it or going to do anything about it. So of government-inspected pork, half of it, every other piece of bacon, every other piece of sausage or piece of ham is going to contain this trichina worm. 20% of the people in the United States get trichinosis. It's more than almost any other country. So they have this disease. This disease is so unusual. The worm can get large enough to wrap around your heart 3 times. The worm can travel from your heart, give you heart problems. In the meantime, you go to a doctor, try to get treated for heart problems. Next thing you know, well, you think you got it taken care of, and the worm moved to some other part of your body. Then you get treated for some other kind of problems because where the worm's at. And finally, the worms go to some other parts of your body, and you go to them for doctors. All your life, you're going through this. Well, some people, actually 5% of these, or we're really talking about 1% of the population of the United States, dies of trichinosis in this country. And tremendous millions are spent treating these symptoms that these worms will give you all over your body. I obviously am not for that. The Bible says it's unclean to eat. It will not digest properly in your body. It is a poor grade of protein. It is not the kind of meat that a health person wants to eat. It is just not the kind of meat. Now there's chicken from your state. We've talked about that a little bit. If it's in your state, it can have the hormones and can cause cancer. If you buy it from out of state, it probably won't have these things and cause cancer. We talked about deep fat frying already. The grease is reused over and over and over, and as it does that, it literally helps to turn it into plastic and coats the food with this thing. So I don't recommend deep fat frying. It's totally unnatural again. White rice, there's very few B vitamins. They've actually polished it off or milled it off. It removed the outside coating to this that was the richest part, and maybe they put it in something else. Probably not to eat, but maybe for animals. Salt and baking powder with aluminum may cause Alzheimer's disease. Now, there's a lot of people that thinks it does. Maybe there's a few that thinks it doesn't. But I tell you, when you use aluminum baking pans, you use salt, you use baking powder with aluminum in it, and you can have aluminum in other things, deodorants, or antiperspirants rather. I wouldn't recommend any antiperspirant whatsoever from any company if it has aluminum in it. You want it out. It can get into your skin in those tender areas. So I don't recommend anything with the aluminum. In the pans that we don't indicate in here because it's not a food, but in the aluminum pans, as you cook food in it, it will transfer food from the food to the aluminum, and at other times you'll transfer aluminum salts back into the food again, and it transfers back and forth as you change from acid to alkaline foods. Processed meat with nitrates are already known to cause cancer and has very poor protein. If you take a slice of bacon, any kind, and you fry it until it's crisp, there's no protein value in it. There is no nutritional value in it. It still has the worms, but they're cooked very well, if you like cooked worms. So it's processed, it has nitrates known to cause cancer. There's not one reason, except perhaps taste, to eat a bacon of any kind. So the nitrates should be always removed. Well, they say, well, if we remove the nitrates, we can't have that meat saved for such a long period of time that they save it for. Well, you haven't got anything anyhow, so there's not much reason to do it. Again, this right-hand side, I don't need to cover it. We've talked about the things that are good for you and all natural and taste better and everything. We just cover that. Each of you read on your own chart.
What if you don't spray fruit? Won't you end up with worms?
Well, a lot of people think so, and that's why there's been a lot of sprays. And just lately, there's been a new trend toward bringing in some kind of other insect. For instance, I'll bring an insect in that can no longer reproduce to try to wipe something out. We have a medfly problem, as we know, in this country. And there's many, many approaches to bring in natural or good insects. They estimate only about 20% of the insects that we would find out in nature is of any harm whatsoever. That the other 80% are very good insects and does a lot of good in this country and helps to fight off a lot of the bad. But the idea is, will you have any insect damage, really relates back again to the soil and whether organic things are better for you or not better for you. Well, organic foods are a lot better for you because the soil that, when it's properly raised organically, is full of all kinds of the minerals and nutritional and trace elements that needs to be there. Rotted matter and organic matter, like a leaf, is a piece of organic matter. As it goes down in the soil and the bacteria attacks it, it starts to rot. And earthworms can eat a lot of this, and it turns it into what's called humus. The earthworms give off what's called a casting in this thing, and they build up maybe, where there's a lot of earthworms, about 1/8 of an inch of rich humus soil every year on any land. Well, as soon as you put chemicals on, you chase these earthworms away. They can't stand the chemicals, or you kill them altogether. So in organic soils, you got all this natural things. The earthworms is gradually eating the organic matter that you plow under or leave on your soil, gradually enriching the soil back again, building what should be 6, 8, 10, 20 inches of topsoil, has now gotten very thin in a lot of places, and almost to the point there's very little topsoil anymore. In fact, even this idea of the natural humus and organic matter in the soil changes, I think, 98% of how much water can be retained in the soil. So it becomes, what's the old saying, is a hard pan. If all of these nutritional elements are, the organic matter, the humus and stuff is washed out of the soil, it gets to be a hard pan, almost like walking down a path, and it's no more grass can grow on the path, and it's very hard. Well, when it rains, the water runs off of it like water off of concrete or a big paved parking lot, and we have a lot of floods. A lot of floods in this country is caused by poor soil. That sounds weird, but it doesn't soak into the soil, because 98 times more water can soak into the soil if it's rich in humus, and it soaks down in the soil, replenishes our water systems that we need, we have trouble with all over this country, and it ends up with a healthier soil, healthier products, and everything else. Now, another area is when these products are healthy, there's at least 3 natural antibiotics that'll grow up into these natural plants. The insects, when they try to eat the plant with these natural antibiotics in it, they don't like it. It's like nature has planned that unless it's sick and needs to be destroyed, the insects will not destroy it. And it's real interesting. They're not interested in a very healthy plant. They're only interested in the sick plant. So when you have insect damage, when you have insects and you need poison sprays, you know that it's not organically raised. You know that it doesn't have the proper nutrients and the proper vitamins and minerals that you need for your health. And the insects know this. They eat the plant or they attack the plant. They try to destroy it. It's one of the good things in nature, just like large predators attacking the sickly animals to help keep the balance of nature. So the idea is, no, you won't need sprays and you won't need any of those chemicals whenever the plant is grown healthy.
What about farming organically?
Well, we just got through talking about that. Let me give you an experience in Illinois. I came from Illinois originally, and we purchased a home next door to us, and it was very long, narrow lots. And so the back half of the lot was about 150 feet deep. We put a fence across the middle of it, and we rented the property out and allowed the property renters to use the front half. In those days, it was good to have gardens. And so they rented the front half and put their garden in the front half. Meantime, in the back half of this, we decided to make a compost pile. Now, to make a compost pile in Illinois is probably a little different than Florida and other places like that. But up there, you would gather all of the cuttings that you could find, any green leaf products, any grass cuttings, anything that was organic, and you would layer it up with usually things like cow manure, lots of cow manure in layers. Sometimes you'd put some lime, something like that, just to help to give it some enrichment like that, or perhaps raw rock phosphate. It's a natural rock that's good for you. Today they make superphosphate by putting sulfuric acid with the raw rock phosphate and making superphosphate. And of course that's the chemical that kills and chases off the earthworms. So if you wanted a natural organic type of fertilizer, you wouldn't want any with superphosphate in it whatsoever. So at any rate, we built up this large compost pile. It was probably 40 feet by 40 feet, and it was about 4 feet deep, different layers of this. And throughout the winter, it would gradually decay, or the bacteria would work on all of the organic matter in this, until by spring, what used to be layers of leaves and manure would turn into a very black, rich soil. And we spread that around on just our half of this backyard area. And we then would grow our crops. Well, I know many times, as the years went by and the soil became richer, we would grow different rows of plants. And I remember we had 2 rows of potatoes go right up to this fence, and our renters put 2 rows of potatoes from the fence right on to make the garden look nice that way. Well, they were out there with different kinds of poison, trying to kill off all of the potato bugs and everything like that, and the bean bugs and the different kinds of plants. They were killing off this with all the poison stuff. And ours was just literally no insect damage at all. There was I remember one plant had some insects on it, because you can't have anything perfect, I guess. One plant had insects on it. We went out there and killed those by hand. But the point is that when it's grown naturally and organically, we didn't have insect damage and we didn't need any of the poisons in it. And I remember picking nearly a bushel of tomatoes off of one plant. We had to get almost on the stepladder to pick some of the tomatoes. And that year I picked 2¼ pound tomatoes off of these plants. It was so large, and I was just a boy too. And I entered these in the state fair, the local fair. And I could only get 3 tomatoes to even hang on a plate at all. And everybody else had 5 tomatoes on the plate. Well, I made the mistake. The rule was you had to have 5 tomatoes on the plate, and I got second place because of that. But I had people come to want to buy the tomatoes from me because they were so large. So it's a very super thing. And in fact, in organic farming, the world's records are held by organic farming. So if there's any farmers out there and they think, well, gee, it costs money to farm, it really doesn't. It's according to how you do it, how selfish you might be, because if you have a large farm and it's not organic at this time, you would probably only be able to, from a financial point of view, convert maybe 10% a year. And you do sheet composting. You plant various legumes and various other kinds of plants that you can plow under. It might be red clover. It might be just anything. Any of the things. Instead of burning it off or instead of mowing it down and hauling it away or something like that, you're grazing it and plowing it under. So it enriches the soil, puts a lot of new organic matter in the soil. And without the chemicals, the earthworms start working on it. Till pretty soon you can enrich it up. It holds the moisture much better. And so the world's records, and I think in Emmaus, Pennsylvania, they do tests, and it's just tremendous amounts. It runs 2 and 3 times more, and sometimes even more than that. Just regular raising of organic as compared to raising it any other way. All the chemical methods and everything else. The best they might do is, 20 bushels or something, or 40 bushels or something, where it might be 100 bushels organically raised. And so it's very much better. And with that little changeover, and that can be done very inexpensively, pretty soon you can have organic farms, and they will produce better quality. You'll get more money for the thing. They'll be more nutritious for the people, less sickness and diseases. It is worth every farmer in America starting to convert their land into the organic type of raising. If they have to do it slow, do it slow. But if they can do it fast, do it fast, because it's that important to us. There's hardly any extra cost to it. I've heard as little as $50 an acre that you can do this thing, and that's a lot better. Then there'll be no poison sprays needed. I know when I was a small boy, I went out through an area that had a peach grove that I could stop at and have a peach now and then. And this one year I went out there, and here's this peach grove, and the guy's bulldozing the grove down. And I stopped. He was taking a break, and I said, "Why are you bulldozing the grove down?" And he happened to be the owner. And he said, "Well, even at this time, we spray about 15 times, and that is economically sound. We can spray this grove with poisons 15 times for peaches in a year. If it goes over 15 times, it's no longer cost effective." Now, of course, he told that to me in perhaps other words, but it was no longer cost effective, and this had reached a point where they had to spray it more than 15 times, and so he was bulldozing it out. And so we talk about, and I know vegetarians sometimes say, "Gee, I want to eat vegetables and fruits and things because meat has hormones, and it has DES and a few other things in it, and so that must be worse for me." Well, I say, no, our fruits and vegetables are just as bad for you because of the way they grow them and all these chemicals that they use on them. And so there's no reason, at least that isn't a reason, to become a vegetarian, if at all.
Have there been any tests run to show that organic foods are really better?
Yes, there has been, and again, more than we can cover here, but some of the main tests, and I think the solidest test that I've ever heard, was actually done in England. For many hundreds of years, England has always had a program where they would take any children that had no parents, and especially boys, and I know in these cases I call them boys' farms, and they would put these kids out on the farm, and they lived their life out there until they was old enough to go out and leave the farm. And they had doctors and dentists and other people that took care of these kids. They kept very good records, and for years and years and years, they kept records. They had farmed these soils. They were depleted. They wasn't really very healthy or anything like that. And as it got closer up into the later times, and this was reported, I believe, in the Lancelot magazine, or newspaper magazine, whichever they call it, journal. It was reported there. They had kept all these records, and somebody decided they would take this one farm and convert it into an organic farm. And they did so. And why, I guess they were considering money. They thought maybe they could do it better that way. Instead, at the time, they'd gotten into using chemicals and things. They said, we'll just make this organic. Well, the only thing is the record after a while proved that the kids had far less problems, health problems, needed medical care, didn't need near as much medical care, didn't have many dental problems or anything else. So that's one of the best tests that I know of. It's really overall. I do know that they have measured the natural nutritional value of foods that are grown naturally and organically, and they always come up much higher than the chemically raised foods, both in protein content and vitamin content and mineral content, because of the trace minerals that's available in the natural soils.
Have tests been run to show that ordinary food help?
Yes, the test that is most lately that's been run has been shown in several of the magazines available today. I'd like to say everybody look them up. They might have to go to a library and dig them out or something like that. But these tests have been run where they've taken schools, and if you'll go into a school today, it's pretty bad what they offer. And I went in and talked to the cafeteria manager in a middle school here just the other day, and this lady said that she believed in natural health and better nutrition, but her hands were tied. She had to do what the school board and the people in authority said that she had to do. And the second thing, she said, the kids aren't taught anything about health and nutrition in the schools anymore. They give them some basic thoughts on what the food groups are, but they don't teach them the good and bad or anything about health and nutrition. And so the kids grow up not knowing. And she says if she serves something nutritional, the kids don't pick it up because they're not used to it. And they don't know anything about it. And they also don't know how to do it real well, so they'll serve it. And even she said when they tried to make this happen, she said to have parents that would come to school and say, well, we can't afford to bring those things that feed our kids that way. So the parents don't know. The schools don't know. The children don't know. And it's just a perpetuating thing that just continues to go on. But when they did change some of these schools and they take out some of the trash foods, well, there was two steps. They changed the diet in the cafeteria and literally said, you eat this or you don't eat. And they had a very special, a more nutritious, not spectacular, just a little more nutritious diet, that they did notice that the grades increased. The kids' grades averages increased, and the kids did better in school. When they then went ahead and took all of the snack foods, the junk foods that's there out, all of the bad sodas and stuff like that, and the donuts and other kinds of snack items, they have candies and candy machines and drink machines. When they took those out, there was another increase in grades. There's a continual increase. So those things like that help to encourage the idea that eating right is the best way to go.
Are people generally healthier in other countries?
As I mentioned earlier, we have our health of this country is at least 39th down on the list. That's a shame because we have such a great country and have so many possibilities and so much capable knowledge. But since we're also interested in money here, we're a capitalistic country, of course, and I find nothing wrong with that at all. I only find the wrong is when a person puts the money ahead of our health of the different people. And just like tests can be run on animals, and we can easily prove with animal tests that a quality food is better for us, proof doesn't seem to be it. It seems to be whatever brings in the most money that's important, and that's really bad. And when we go to uncivilized countries and we really check out that these other countries are eating more natural, we find out that they're healthier, and they just are the kind of health that we need to have. And they may not process their foods near as much. They may have a different way of eating. But just about every country and every part of the world, there is, even though a different way of eating and some different food products, they're able to get a balanced diet as long as it stays pretty natural. The Eskimos, many, many years ago, were known to be very healthy people. And man went up there and took their sugar and their salt and their coffee and their tobacco and various other things to the Eskimos. And they started getting all the same diseases that the people in the United States had. And so there's plenty of facts. There's plenty of convincing pieces of evidence and great huge masses of evidence. It's a matter, does a person want to find out about it? Are they tired of seeing somebody sick? Do they hurt a little? Does a mother hurt a little when they see their child or their baby sick? If they don't hurt, if they say, well, the doctor's going to save them, take care of them, miracle workers, maybe they just get by with it. Or if they think, well, we didn't cause it. I mean, we're innocent. I mean, but we're not. We cause our own diseases. very innocently loving parents, loving mothers. Very especially, a mother is usually the key to having the nutrition and the foods for a family. And she kind of sets the pace. But keep in mind, it's still the husband's responsibility to see that it goes the right direction. And there's really no blame on the husband or the wife. The blame is on the system that says, we'll put chemicals in and take the place of it. We'll make money instead of taking care of somebody. We'd just soon have you sick because we make more money if you're sick. And it's those kinds of things. And I'm kind of a little bit upset about the whole situation.
Wealthy people can afford to eat well. They must be lucky.
It seems funny, but rich people many times will give all they have for health because they can buy things that are highly processed, very rare to find, and sometimes not very good for you. They can afford to have, you know, let's say a rich kid might afford to have a lot more candy bars than the poor kid. He might eat a lot more of them like that and have lots of problems. So maybe a rich kid is not better off, but he could be. He could very well be. But food that's nutritious does not cost extra, because you must count your doctor bills in that. You must count your medical bills, drugstores, all those things they have in a drugstore. I don't care whether it's just to take care of a cold symptom or anything else. You've got to count all those expenses in one bill. Do not separate it. Don't just look at the idea that a organic food or a good natural food costs a little more. Don't look at that. You have to look at the idea that by it being natural and organic, it's preventing you from spending money in the medical or for extra bills in any of the areas of health or drugstore items or anything like that. Good food isn't expensive from that point of view. And in fact, it can be made free, considering how much you pay for the doctor bills. It can literally be free. And I look at it as being the cheapest way to go, by far. The cheapest way to go is to eat natural, organic, and natural health foods and whole grain products.
What about caring for elders in nursing homes?
Well, caring for your elders is a problem that's probably extremely embarrassing to lots of families. They love their grandmother or grandfather, if they're still around. They love them. They want to care for them. But it's a busy life, and so many of them will be put into these care homes of some type. And in there, you will find some of the finest people you could ever want to meet. And I wonder how they can even handle it, because some of these old people need so much care, and they're just down. They don't know how to care for themselves and everything else. And I think one of the ways, and I believe again this is federally caused or by the state or some kind of the authorities in the medical area, but they keep these people so drugged that every day they have a certain amount of drugs that they give all of these patients. And they just keep them a little bit sedated, just a little bit drugged out. And they give them very little fruit, very little things like that. They sure wouldn't make juice for them. They sure wouldn't do anything like that, and they can't chew very well sometimes. So next thing you know, they're eating nothing but a dish of mashed potatoes, a dish of macaroni, some cheese sometimes, or spaghetti, things like this. A lot of dead food without enzymes, and their excuse is, well, they can't chew them, or they can't do this. And if they get a little upset, we'll keep them sedated, and it's just timing them until they die. And it's a shame. I've been around some of them. I've been into some of them. I even tried to take fruit into some of the people for a little while. Some of the people who took the fruit from them even. But it is real pity. Now, if you're able to keep them at home and keep them on fresh juices that you can juice and make sure they get plenty of raw fruits, and in any way, if they can't chew very well, make it so that it's blended or something like that, and they get that in, you can keep them happier and healthier and alive a lot longer. If you love your family, you'd want to do something like that. Or we got to insist these homes get straightened out, because they're just sort of keeping them going until they die.
Well, what would you like to say to teenagers?
Teenagers are well known to me. Having 6 daughters and a couple of kids, they've all been through the teenage years, but one's about to go into it. I've seen that they seem to know everything. But later they learn that they get smarter, and they learn they didn't know everything, and their parents knew more than you thought before. You've heard the old story. Well, they're also able to handle almost everything. A kid can eat wrong, he can eat all the junk foods, and he can do things wrong, burn the candle at both ends, not get enough sleep. And surprisingly enough, his youth has the ability to keep him in pretty good shape up until about age 30. And then it kind of falls apart. And it's just very important that we do something to make them realize that it is more that it's smarter to eat say a whole wheat product with 24 nutritional elements than a white flour product with 2 nutritional elements. That it's more important for him to have endurance and strength that he might get from the B vitamins in the whole wheat than to be without them in something else. They have to learn that the end thing is to be healthy, not to be sick. The end thing is to just do right things and be strong and be capable of being an astronaut or anything else they want to be as a kid. And to learn the truth. They'll have to get it from parents. They're going to have to get it from schools. They've got to get it from somewhere until it becomes the natural, normal thing to do. There needs to be then government controls to take away some of the things that's really bad for our kids. I don't believe in outlawing things, but if you can educate people enough, and if you can really let the public know the truth, the public will probably make a good decision, and I'm for that. There's some really interesting things I'd like to show you on a chart. I've had a book that was printed in 1916, and it's called the Roston Health Club. And at 1916, it had been around for 40 years already. It was in its 120th printing, and they didn't even know germs existed. Let me show you a little about it in this chart. So get out your chart on the Roston Health Club. Let's take a look at that. Even though this Roston Health Club, 1916, came from a book, at that time it had 120 printings and is 40 years old, and here's the thing that I found interesting that I wanted to point out here today. They decided to question 6,000 people. And they asked them a basic question is, and each group was asked this question, 1,000 each. There was 1,000 people in each of these groups. And it says, they were asked their opinion of the value of good health. Well, a group between age 15 and 20, they had no interest. Now you're going to find today that's just about the same situation. Age 20 to 30, there was 40 of them that were interested. 960 still weren't interested. Age 30 to 40 group of 1,000 people. 600 of them were not interested. 200 wished they had been interested earlier. And 200 said it was already too late. And here's 30 to 40. At age 40 to 50, 300 were not interested but had health problems. 100 were in good health. 600 wished they had been interested earlier. They were in poor health. The ages between 50 and 60, 150 were not interested but had health problems. About 50 of them were in good health. 800 wished they'd been interested earlier. They were in poor health today. At age 60 to 70, 3 said they were never sick. 37 said they were never seriously sick. 79 were in fair health but wished they had watched their health earlier. And 881 said they were fools for neglecting their health. Well, I believe we can expect a lot of the same answers today. Children or young people are actually setting what kind of an old age they're going to have today. They think it's going to be good because they can handle foods better today. They think it will be. But actually it's going to be a lot worse than most of us in the past because they have more polluted air, water, soil, foods. All these things are more polluted. There's more things that they're eating that are partialized foods, not whole foods, and they have that kind of a problem.
Well, Jack, what should they do now?
They must start living a better life. They've got to change something. If they don't change something, they're looking for the same kind of sicknesses and diseases that other people have. And so to have a future health, they're going to have to do some things. And one of the basic things we're going to do is we're going to have to substitute good foods for bad foods. And that is one of the main things of this entire program. I do not like the idea that we get a bad food and somebody gets used to it and they say, well, gee, I just can't get rid of it because it tastes so good, I just need it, I've got to have it, I'm going to keep eating it, and it didn't kill me yesterday, so I probably won't die from it today. I mean, some kind of a thought like that. They don't realize the accumulative effect from bad foods. But again, if they taste good, you say, well, gee, I hate to give up something that tastes good. What can we do? We have to substitute something to take the place of the bad one. We want the substitute food to have at least 2 qualities. One, it's got to taste as good as the old one, maybe better if you're lucky. And the other one has got to be better for you and not do the harm that the old one did. Now we have a chart here. Please get out your chart on the substitutes for better health. And we'd like to cover that for you. Now on this chart we have some substitutes for better health. I do not in any way cover all of them. Again, I'm going to go down the left-hand column in here. I may talk about the others, but I'd like to go down the left-hand column. These are poor or bad for you. Many of them we've touched on before, but just bear with me here. White flour pancakes and waffles. Obviously, we can have whole wheat ones, pancakes and waffles. Margarine. Obviously, we can have butter. Syrups. There's many kinds of syrup, but you can have real maple syrup or honey to take place of those. Here's cooked fruit toppings with sugar. Have some kind of real fruit, real sliced peaches or real fruit to use that. Here's our whipped toppings. Again, have real whipped cream. That's not bad. You can sweeten it with a little bit of honey. You can sweeten it with a little maple syrup. Terrific things instead of that old stuff. Frozen orange juice. You can have fresh squeezed orange juice to take the place of that. Here's stewed prunes. Don't stew them. If you want to soak them in water overnight to make them a little tender, you can do that. But don't heat them above 107 degrees, and then you still have all the other vitamins and the enzymes. Applesauce sweetened. If you've ever eaten real homemade applesauce that you can make in any blender, they're very cheap. Just cut up your apples and put them in a blender. You can peel them, but I suggest to wash them real good and even use the skins in there, and you can sweeten it if you want to with a little honey. You can put a little cinnamon in it, and you have a very delicious applesauce. Or you can have the, apple butter with the cinnamon, applesauce without the cinnamon. Your grocery cereals. I've never counted them, but they must have 100 or 200 brands of cereals in the grocery store. Take the sugar away from most of them, you wouldn't have much. Take the artificial vitamins away from some of these cereals that is talked like it has all of them that you need in there, or that's many times better. Remember seeing TV, it says this cereal is better than 10 bowls of some other cereal or whatever. You take that cereal and you take the artificial vitamins out, and you've got nothing much left. So you want a cereal that has real whole grains. The better quality, the better. You'll need to buy those at a health food store, and when you substitute some of the good ones at a health food store, you will not go back to this kind of junk cereal with 15 or 16 poisons in it and no nutritional value that's real, but only synthetic vitamins made out of crude oil and coal tar is known to cause cancer and gray hair and other problems. Your grocery store bread, again, another kind of flour or cereal thing that is not good. You need to get the organically raised type. White flour, same kind of a problem. You can always substitute whole wheat flour. Homogenized milk, substitute raw certified milk. Make them give it to you. Go to every government official, raise heck, do whatever's necessary. If they won't do that in first step, at least go back to getting good pasteurized milk with the cream on top. Never homogenized milk, never. Chocolate products, there is a product called carob. It comes from a honey locust tree. There's a pod. They grind it up into a powder. It's very much like cocoa, and it'll make a pretty fair substitute. It will not taste just like chocolate. It doesn't have the theobromine in it of chocolate, and you have to be careful that when you make a carob product, you don't use the same hardened fats and the same sugars, because it's not going to be that much better for you. Sugar, well, normally white sugar is bleached, has no nutritional value in it. At least substitute something like honey. There's other maple syrups or things like that you can substitute too. Coffee, if you have to have the taste of coffee and you don't want the caffeine, these non-caffeinated coffees are not much of a help. They're made with green coffee beans. They're made with a chemical and a type of poison. It's better to stay away from all coffee and all coffee products. You can have some substitutes. One of them is called Piro, or go into a health food store and find a substitute that's very close to this. Again, you don't even need hot drinks most of the time. You can probably do totally without it once you get off of the drug addiction of the caffeine. Cola drinks, the same thing. Once you get off of the drug addiction of the flavor and the sugar addiction, you probably won't need any of these cola drinks, and you can substitute health food store sodas if you need some sodas to have that sparkling taste to it. There's quite a number of some natural sodas at a health food store. Pretty good choices. Some of them are very heavy in the natural fruits. Now, they're still sparkling, and they're mostly natural fruits. So you can improve on that 10 times over, and a very good substitute. Cookies, you can find some delicious cookies. They're made in whole wheat flour. They're made from lots of other whole grains. They have lots of nuts or raisins or carob chips in them or something like that, and you can find plenty of substitutes to take care of the cookie problem. Toasted nuts, most of the time eat nuts that are not toasted. You can have whole pecans, whole English walnuts, whole almonds, lots of different nuts that are not untoasted. You can even have untoasted peanut butter if you want to do it and eat untoasted nuts. The regular peanut butter, definitely, if it's hydrogenated, if it has hardened fats in it, like margarines or hardened fats, and it has sugars in it, stay away from it. It's toasted, it kills part of the protein, so stay away from it. Use the natural peanut butters with the oil that comes on top and get them fresh in that way. Bacon, sausage, ham, just do without them totally. Use any other kind of I might suggest ground beef and put a little sausage seasoning in it, and you can make a pretty good sausage substitute. They have some things that can substitute for ham and bacon these days, but I frankly think that if you did have a beef bacon, that you would only want to cook it a little bit and don't cook it to the point that it's crisp, because no food is good for you, no protein is good for you once it's crisp, this sort of thing. We have some more on another page here. Processed cheese. Well, you have what's called American processed cheese food. It almost gets to a cheese. So it's better to have some kind of natural cheese. And there is a tremendous variety of natural cheeses. You don't have to go to a health food store for the natural cheese. It doesn't have to be made from raw milk. You can get a lot of good whole cheeses in a regular grocery store. Definitely have those instead of the pasteurized cheese, the processed cheeses. Here you have beef with fat. Very simply, substitute the less fat beef. Still eat the beef. I'm not telling you don't eat beef or stay away from the red meat of beef. Get it with very little fat. If you can, get it that's range-fed, so that's not fattened especially. But if you get it fat at the grocery store, cut off 90% of the fat. Fruitcake. Surprisingly enough, you can make fruitcake yourself very easily. You can get some dried fruits at the health food store. You can get some natural Graham cracker type things that you can get and crush up. You can mix it with fresh, say, condensed orange juice or something like that, or put a little blackberry wine, and you can put in all of these nuts, all these natural raw nuts in it, and you can compress this together and refrigerate it, and you don't have to bake it. And you can make some of the best tasting fruitcake you've ever seen, and it's totally nutritious. You won't find it near as bad as this fruitcake. It'll be so much better. The candy with sugar, you're going to have to either make your own or buy your own candies that has natural honey in it or some kind of natural sweetener. Not candy with sugar. It's not needed. And if you don't have this habit to eat sugars, you won't need the candy with sugar. You're going to have other things that substitutes for it, whether it be fruits or nuts or pieces of cheese or just some kind of a health food product made with sugar. All the desserts, cakes, and pies can be made with whole wheat flours, can be made with honey, can be made with real fruits, can be made with real nuts. All the different things can be done to this. You can definitely find all kinds of good substitutes. You don't have to have it all messed up with just white sugar, white flour, artificial flavoring, artificial coloring, and all those kind of things that just makes it a fake thing. Your body sees this, puts on the weight. You didn't want the weight in the first place. We've talked about chicken from your state. Buy it from out of state. Got chicken that says there's no hormones in it. There's no additives to it. Hydrogenated fats, don't use them at all. Use regular vegetable oils that are liquid at room temperature in all of your salads and all your cooking and frying. White crackers, today you can find whole wheat crackers, quite a number of whole wheat crackers, and they run all the way from partially whole wheat and white, that's at least a better step than this, all the way up to 100% whole wheat. And you can have them with salt or without. Frankly, I prefer them with salt. I think a small amount of salt in things adds to the flavor, and as long as you don't overdo it and eat too many salty foods, you're going to be just fine. White pasta, you can find whole wheat pasta in almost every type of pasta. Whole wheat lasagna, whole wheat spaghetti, whole wheat elbow macaroni, and et cetera, and et cetera, and et cetera. All kinds of whole wheat ones. Some of them even come with certain vegetables in them in different colors, but you can get whole wheat ones. The white is so much worthless, forget it. Fake eggs, use natural eggs. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the natural eggs. Probably a lot cheaper to eat natural eggs too. Canned vegetables, get the fresh vegetables, and as much as you can, buy them fresh vegetables and cook them, steam them. Steam them a little bit yourself. Canned foods, get fresh or frozen foods. Don't go into all this canned food you have in the store. Most canned foods you don't need. A pea in the garden that you would get has 100 times more nutritional value than one in a can here. Frozen foods, well, they're not too bad, but if you can get fresh foods instead of frozen, you've gone up just a little bit better yet. Regular meats, well, use organ meats. Now we're just saying if just from regular meats, that we're saying it's okay to have beef, but regular meats, use organ meats as much as you can. They are a lot less expensive, and they're sometimes up to 1,000 times better for you. And especially the liver type and the heart, they have a lot more of the B complex that you need. Canned juice drinks, some of them have 10% and sometimes less. Can you imagine? Here's one of the food savings real good areas, because you get a can of juice that may either have no fruit juice in it, nothing good for you at all, and you spend a lot of money for it. Some of them have 10% or 5%. You spend a lot of money for it. Imagine buying a can of whole juice now. It doesn't have the water, it has real juice in it, and doesn't have artificial flavorings and colorings and sugars and everything else, so it's not even bad for you. So there's a way you really save a lot of money to use the real juices instead of spending all that money for water. Canned vegetable juice. Well, again, that's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not real great for you. Make your own fresh vegetable juices. You have juicers, or buy a juicer and do it. Now, ice cream with sugar, you can buy ice cream with honey, and that's a much better step than this. Get an all-natural ice cream at best step. Again, sugar is not natural. They can call it natural all they want to on some of these cans, but it's not natural. Jams and jellies with sugar, you can get now, various, in a regular grocery store even, you can get the jams and jellies that have no sugar in them at all. They have just extra good fruits that they're made out of. They're nothing but fruit. And that's a good choice. It isn't going to harm this at all. Yes, these are cheaper with the sugar, because sugar is usually 50%. Half fruit, half sugar. And so you think you're saving money. Gelatin with sugar. Well, we know that some of the name brands of the gelatin with sugar. You might have to get your own gelatin. Maybe you'll have to get a health food store, get some plain gelatin, use your sweetening, use some real juices in it, and use some either maple syrup or use some honey in to sweeten it if you want to. Lard, today, even the lard that we have today is hydrogenated. I don't recommend that at all. Go to a vegetable oil to do all your cooking and frying in, and we'll have to watch out because all kinds of this stuff is at the restaurants you go to and put into everything. We talked about head lettuce. None of the head lettuces that are solid white, like an iceberg lettuce or something like that, these aren't any good for you. They only can be grown chemically. That is the only way they can be grown. Let's see. We continue on. Pork, squirrel, and rabbit. Well, these are some of the items that we do not recommend. They don't digest in the proper place in your body, so it'd be better that you use beef or lamb or chicken or turkey, or if you can get wild pheasant or quail or something like that, sure, but not these. The crab, the shrimp, the lobster, clams, and oysters. Again, these are filter feeders. They're 60 to 100 times more pollutants out of the ocean. They tested ocean water, and they found that every part of the ocean had pieces of toilet paper in it that was so polluted that they could find pieces of toilet paper every place on the earth. So with all that pollution, it gets into these very heavily in their body and their shells. They're unfit to eat. Many, many people die from eating these things. They're very, very polluted. They said there is none grown anywhere that is worth eating. 1% low-fat milk. A lot of people try to use that. It might be a little higher in protein. It's lower in fat. It's an imbalanced, incomplete food. Again, it's homogenized. I highly recommend a whole milk, raw or pasteurized. Mashed potatoes. Well, now and then, if you have real good potatoes as a variation, okay, mashed potatoes might not be too bad. But you can bake a potato and the whole potatoes with the skin and have it like that. A suggestion is very unusual. If you've ever had leftover mashed potatoes in the refrigerator and you left a spoon in it or something, you'll find it'll come out shaped just like the bowl. They seem to harden up on you. If you'll add kohlrabi, it's another vegetable, and you add about 30 or 40% kohlrabi to this, mash it up, make your potatoes. Sometimes it's a little bit lumpy, but it comes out very creamy, a better flavor. And if you leave it in the refrigerator, surprisingly enough, it doesn't harden up like the old potatoes. French fries, deep fat fried. Again, we've covered those. Try to substitute a French fry at home. Use a fresh vegetable oil. Fry your fresh potatoes chopped up with the skin on it. Cook it up good and put your little salt on it if you need to, whatever you have to do, and you'll find that you can substitute for that and have a delicious French fry at home. And you can also slice up potatoes in much larger. I don't know whether they call that German fries or what they call it, but you can very quickly slice a potato up, leaving the skin on it, and fry it in some fresh oil and put a few seasonings on it, and you have a very delicious fried type of potato here. White rice, very simply substitute brown rice. It's the best choice you have to substitute that. Oyster soup. I don't know how many of you might use oyster soup, but I recommend not using oysters. There is another product called salsify. It's a vegetable oyster, and you slice it a little bit. It looks just about like an oyster, and when you cook it up tender, you can make a very good substitute oyster soup with it. It's pretty doggone good tasting. Pork and beans, that's a shame. That's another trick, everybody. They put a little quarter-inch piece of pork fat in beans, and they call it pork and beans. Well, you can obviously buy beans without the pork or insist on it. Get fresh baked beans yourself. Don't put any pork in it. You don't need that pork fat in there, and it's one of those things I don't recommend. Brown sugar, again, that is a processing beyond white. They go a little bit further than white sugar. They take white sugar, they either color it up a little bit or they burn it a little bit extra to try to give it a brown color. It doesn't have the minerals in it that should have it in. It's not like raw sugar. Regular tea, most of the teas you find in the store, sometimes they have a decaffeinated tea. I still don't recommend the regular teas. I recommend herb teas. There's over 100 different flavors. Why should you stick to one? The reason people stick to the one is because of the thiamine in it and the caffeine that's in the regular tea. They're hooked on that. They're not hooked on the taste of the tea. Fiber foods. Well, we wouldn't need fiber foods if we ate plenty of natural whole wheat foods. Plenty of foods with whole grains in them. Plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables that have the fiber in them. We wouldn't have to get a fiber food that doesn't taste good. So we have no trouble beating that one. The only way they make a fiber food taste good today is by adding lots of sugars in it and lots of other flavorings to it. Salt with aluminum. We've covered that. You can buy salt at the health food store. As sea salt, you can buy other salts that does not have the aluminum in it. Don't use the salt with the aluminum. Antiperspirants. I mentioned that before. We do not want an antiperspirant because it has the aluminum in it, and it also does one other thing. When you put that on, the word antiperspirant is saying they want to stop the natural perspiration of your body. You do not want that to happen. That is a natural thing. It helps to eliminate poisons right out of your system, and if you tried to stop the poisons from coming out of your system by way of perspiring all over your body, you wouldn't last very long before you'd die. You have to get rid of it. So this is a harmful product. Nobody should use it. There is sometimes some other substitutes. There is a thing called a natural mineral rock, and it's a very unusual shaped rock, but it is very smooth, and you can use it for a year, this one rock for a year, and it does an excellent job. It can be used any place, even take care of foot odors, but any place in the body and foot odors, and it works very good. You just moisten it just a little bit, and it has a lot of potassium in it and a lot of minerals in it, and it seems to do the job very well. With baking powder with aluminum, we've talked about aluminum up here, the same kind of a situation here. You can use a baking powder called Rumford, and there's a couple of other types. Just make sure it does not have aluminum in it. Aluminum cooking pans, substitute any non-aluminum cooking pans. And you can even have aluminum pans that are coated with a material like anodizing or some type of a situation where they're coated to the point the aluminum does not transfer. Get that kind. Hot dogs with nitrates. You can buy hot dogs without nitrates. I'm not sure what a person could make their own too, but that's very unusual. But you can buy hot dogs without nitrates at a health food store. Cold cuts with nitrates. Again, you can buy cold cuts without the nitrates at a health food store. There are not as many choices, but after we all ask for better ones, we'll be able to get better things in here. They have to be usually kept frozen or they be used up fresh. Fake dairy products substitute real dairy products. That's all says it all in one. Non-dairy sour cream, use a real sour cream. There's nothing wrong with that. And a yogurt with sugar, substitute a yogurt with honey or without any sugar or sweetening at all. So we have many items now that we can substitute and get a very good tasting, a much more healthy situation. We can improve our life and overall save money because you're not having to have all the doctor bills or medical bills and other drugstore bills. Okay, that means you don't have to give up food. You can actually have everything you need without it. You don't have to give up the stuff that's trying to kill you without substituting something good for you. You can spend a lot of money, let's say going to college, learning all your college education, and if you haven't eaten right, you're liable not to even be able to go into your stated area of career that you want to go into. You'll have a higher IQ. That's better with good nutrition. I know in one case, and it's another very pitiful thing that happened, but this was a test that was run. This particular group went into an instructional situation where parents were there with their retarded children. Now, the children were at different levels. Very low IQs, they could hardly print their name on the board. And that was about the situation there. Some of them were so bad, they were crouched up in a corner like a vegetable, and they hardly knew you were alive. These people said, if you can increase the diet a little bit, we've got a suggestion. We'd like to give these children about a little Gouda Cola. It's one of the herbs called Gouda Cola, and to give them lecithin. And just those two things, we'd like to see what happens. Well, they were turned down by all of the people in that class with all these retarded children except one. And the one lady, her child was crouched down in the corner that hardly knew that he was awake. And she said, "What do I have to lose? I will try that." And she tried it. 6 months later, she had the brightest kid in that class. There's other evidence to increase the IQs from 20 to 80 points. The lower IQ, the more you can increase it. But it's definitely nutrition, and good quality nutrition can increase the IQ in spite of those that say you can't. I have seen it done. I know that it can be done.
What about school lunches?
You're talking from a mother's point of view. School lunches are a major problem today. If you go send your child to school, you send them with $2 or $3, and they go there and they pick whatever the school line has. If you send them a brown bag, then they're going to end up with just what you can have time to send them. And if you're a busy lady, you may be working somewhere, and that's very difficult to do. Well, we have a couple of things to look at. One is some of the school lunches are getting better as time goes along. There's more choices. They're having more things on the line. But still, because of the more choices does not mean that your child is going to get those better choices unless we teach them what to get. I know my little boy is going to school, and for a while, he couldn't seem to get what needs to be there. And we've talked to the school lunch manager, and now things are a little bit better. And he can go through a certain line and have many, many choices to what he can pick up. And he can now find a lot better things in the school lunches. I really think the brown bag idea to take a school lunch, whether it's popular or not, is a much better way to go, because we can then send them the proper whole grain breads. We can send them fresh meats instead of perhaps some of these cold cut types of meats. You can send a lunch box that has a little iced item. You know, you can put something in the freezer and it has a little frozen amount of ice, and it'll keep the food plenty cool. You can send them natural yogurts, and you can send them real peanut butter instead of the other types. You can send them a lot of different things in a school lunch. So I recommend, really caring about the kids and sending them better things. Right now, it doesn't seem to be popular. By the time they get to be in junior high, it's like, gee, it's not popular, it's not cool to bring a lunch. And that problem is just one that education and caring is going to have to improve. The other step is we're going to have to raise heck with the right people till we get better foods offered to school without the junk foods. I mean, they try to push ice cream on kids every day, or at least make it available for them, and other things that are not good for them. So talk to your own lunchroom people, get a hold of the school boards, try to make some changes go into that system.
What should I serve at a birthday party?
Okay, the old natural standby at birthday parties is usually cake and ice cream, sometimes not even ice cream, and usually some kind of a Kool-Aid or some kind of a soft drink that's served. And I think we can improve a lot on that. But the kids are used to certain things. We even make it happen that way. We serve the standard things. And birthday kids coming over to visit, you're expecting a lot of the standard things. So I'm going to tell you that is not one of the easy things to take care of. I don't say skip the birthdays, but maybe you can start off by having at least some choices so that the kids can maybe try something. Have a lot of different fruits. Have some little dishes with different kinds of nuts in them. Have better drinks. Definitely you can have fresh fruit drinks, and that's a lot better. You can maybe have fruit types of, not a fruit cake necessarily, but a cake that has a fruit filling or some kind of a thing on it. I've seen some pies now and then that's about half raw strawberries, and it comes out, very, very good tasting. And you can use real whipped cream on the top of that. Or you can get some natural ice creams and have the natural ice creams in place of the other kinds. And of course I would skip the chocolate ones and the chocolate chips and the chocolate cookied ice cream and all of those rippled types and everything else with the chocolate in it. So you can do quite a number of things with the real foods, real juices, real fruits, real nuts, and things like that, and put on a pretty good one. At least have it there as a substitute.
Is the time of day to eat important?
Well, I think the time to eat is extremely important. And whether we want to say, breakfast is our most important meal, and that's the time to eat, and we'll be talking about breakfast some more, but that's a time you've broken the fast from nighttime to morning, and it's time for you to eat. It's time to prepare your body with all of the nutrition that you need in the morning to sustain your blood sugar level up high, and it's time to keep it going into a very high level for energy and endurance. And so there is a proper time, and we're going to see how that works chemically in your system in a few minutes. But you probably try to adjust yourself, if you're on a busy schedule, see if you can adjust yourself to a 2-meal day. That way, that saves time.
Eat one meal in the morning that's very high quality and eat another meal sort of late afternoon. In the meantime, your blood sugar level's been up all the time and you can continue to do your day's work. I know that will not fit in with every job, and so you can adjust it either way. But I suggest no between meal snacks because the timing is wrong then. The between meal snacks, what it does is puts food in your stomach at a time when it needs to be empty. Now, something about eating causes our stomach to get scratched, causes our stomach to have little damaged areas, probably in the different kinds of fibers and different things that we might have in our foods and maybe how we chew them. And it causes little damages to come on our stomach lining. And it's a very tender thing, even though we have a lot of stomach acids down there. They get nicked or scratched probably many times, maybe a day. And the only way they can heal themselves is to be empty. And when it's empty, it can then heal itself.